and together with Amanda Murray, we will be assisting with moderation and keeping an eye on chat this session. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Power Library, for sponsoring this session. Power Library is a statewide database of library catalogs accessible from a single website on the internet for all residents of Pennsylvania. Services have grown to include electronic databases, digital collections, and a 24/7 live chat service. In 2013, all of these services were united under a single web portal and named Power Library. Power Library is the online portal to all that Pennsylvania libraries offer. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that we are following Merrick's Code of Conduct and that we do not tolerate harassment, discrimination, or hostile behavior. The entire Code of Conduct will be linked in the chat. We will be utilizing the live transcript for this session for accessibility purposes. If you would like to hide the subtitles, simply click the live transcription button at the bottom of your application and select Hide Subtitle. Please be sure to use the Q&A feature to pose questions to the panelists and not the webinar chat. Finally, do take the time to watch our pre-recorded poster sessions on the Merrick YouTube channel. I'll also be posting a link to that in chat. Now I'll turn it over to our wonderful panelists for this session.
Thank you, Gabby. And thank you to the 96 people who showed up on the last day, in the last session. We are thrilled to have you here. My name is Tara Wink. I'm the Historical Collections Librarian and Archivist at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And today with Jordan, who will go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Jordan. I'm the one of the library service specialists here, so I mostly work in information services.
And we are thrilled to present Mrs. Doctor's Wife, Re-Identifying Women in the Archives. Just very briefly, we're both going to share positionality statements to kind of center you all on where we are and who we are presenting this today. So for the purpose of transparency and honesty, I'd like to quickly share a bit about my identity and what I'm bringing to this presentation. I am a cisgender, white, heterosexual woman. I'm a wife and a mother. I'm one of the first people in my family to earn a bachelor's degree and the first to earn a master's. My entire professional career has been, of roughly 14 years, who's counting, has been in academia, first in a more traditional 4-year undergraduate heavy university, and now in a more professional school. These identities have shaped my worldview and have brought things to this presentation.
Yeah, and again, I'm Jordan. I am a cisgendered straight white woman in my mid-20s who comes from a woman-dominated progressive family. I grew up in West Virginia, and I was the first in my family to earn a bachelor's degree and the first in my family to be in graduate school. My professional interests largely revolve around accessibility, disability, and ableism. And I am currently an MLIS student at the University of Maryland.
And this is a really sensitive mouse. I apologize, everybody. So briefly, a little bit about the University of Maryland, Baltimore, before we get into the meat of our presentation. The University of Maryland, Baltimore was founded in 1807 as the College of Medicine of Maryland. What you're seeing on your screen is our first building, Davidge Hall in the center with the dome. It looks a bit different today, but it is still here and is actually directly diagonal from where we are presenting. In 1812, the name changed to the University of Maryland, Baltimore, becoming the founding institution of the University of Maryland, Baltimore system, or University of Maryland system. In 1812, when that name change occurred, the new charter also included in addition to the School of Medicine, a School of Law, a School of Arts and Sciences, and a School of Divinity. The Arts and Sciences and the School of Divinity soon folded. However, the School of Medicine and Law continue to thrive. And today we also have schools of dentistry, which was founded in 1840, a School of Pharmacy established in 1841, a School of Nursing established in 1898, a graduate school established in 1918, and the School of Social Work, which was established in 1961. UMB is an urban school, and we are located on the west side of the city of Baltimore. I do see chats coming in. I just want to make sure.
Tara, I just
Here.
wanted to cut in and say that your sound is going out a little, if there's any way to fix that.
If I lean in, let me try to lean in a little bit and see if that helps. Is that better? Thanks, John. Okay, I will lean in and Jordan will do the same. Apologies, this worked okay the other day, so of course, technology, right? All right, so leaning in. The Health Sciences and Human Services Library at UMB is one of two libraries here at the school. It was started in 1813 with the purchase of a book collection from John Crawford. He was a bibliophile and also a faculty member in the School of Medicine. He had a huge collection, and the School of Medicine identified the importance of it and purchased the collection, which is where we trace our history here at the HSHSL. What you're seeing here is the first library building. It was purchased much later. We actually, the library was actually in Davidge Hall, the earlier building I pointed out, until this building was purchased. And it's actually on the same corner as where we are currently located. So the newer building on your screen was finished in 1998, and we opened that year. I did mention there are two libraries. The other library is in the School of Law. And historical collections in the HSHSL includes that original 1813 book collection. In this photo, you can see that book collection around the outside of the room. A lot of these books are also digitized and available online. So we do house historical book collections for 6 of the 7 schools here on campus. As I mentioned, the law school has its own library, and they handle the historic collections for the School of Law as well. We are not an official archive, but we do collect archival records and institutional records as much as we can for the 6 of the 6 schools that we work with. I've been here since 2018, and I was the first professionally trained archivist to be hired. And if any of you have been the first professionally trained archivist, you know what that means and what I face. So I get a lot of help from other people in the library as a department of one. Including Jordan. And as many of you know, it takes a village to run a historical collection. So one of the amazing collections that I get to work with is the Women's Auxiliary Board, which is going to be the focus of today's presentation. The Women's Auxiliary Board of the University Hospital. Again, the University Hospital is directly behind where we're presenting today. If you could see through the window that is very glary, the hospital still stands, and it was opened in 1823. So it just celebrated its 200th anniversary. The WAB was founded in 1887 when physicians, many of which were professors in the School of Medicine, suggested that women could help with the domestic administration of the hospitals. As a result, women started volunteering in the line-in hospital, which, if you're not familiar with those terms, that means labor and delivery. And at the time, that line-in hospital was directly across the street from the University Hospital. The volunteers would clean, take care of linens and hospital supplies, as well as visit with the patients. At a faculty meeting in 1889, Professor Julian J. Chisholm suggested that women should formally be organized as the Board of Lady Managers and expand their work to the University Hospital. The faculty were unhappy with the work and demands of the Sisters of Charity, which was a group of nuns who had been running the hospital up until that point, and that Sister of Charity contract was expiring in December of 1889. So as a result, the Women's Auxiliary Board of Lady Managers was officially founded in 1890. The first president was Miss Susan Williams, and many of the women volunteers, again, were physicians' wives. It was the first hospital auxiliary in the state of Maryland, and while we can't prove this, we believe it was the first women's auxiliary board in the country. But again, it's hard to prove this. Maybe one day we will. Almost immediately, the board became a fundraising arm for the hospital. And the first fundraising effort was a benefit concert in December 1891. And you'll hear more about what the auxiliary board did from Jordan. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how important they were as fundraisers. The organization was incorporated in August 1919. And also as an incorporation, they became tax exempt. The name was changed in November 1975 to the Auxiliary of the University of Maryland Hospital, but unfortunately membership dwindled in later years and the organization was ultimately dissolved in 1999. The collection. So the link to this collection is also in the chat. Thank you, Amanda, for doing that for me, as well as the finding aid. But you can scan this QR code and it will take you to the WAB collection, the digitized collection, where you can scroll through and see some of the documents we're talking about today. Sorry, thoughts. Okay, the WAB collection contains published and unpublished histories of the organization, legal documents and paperwork relating to the organization's tax-exempt status, annual reports, newspaper clippings, photographs, letters, programs, event flyers, invitations, newsletters, but most importantly for today's talk, nearly 100 years of mostly handwritten meeting minutes. The records were transferred to the HSHSL in 1999 when the organization dissolved. So I'm thrilled that there was foresight in planning and getting that collection here. And sometime prior to my tenure, which again began in 2018, the collection was digitized. When I arrived, I processed the collection and created a finding aid, and there's a link to that finding aid in the chat as well for the collection. And just a note, the digitized collection and the physical collection are slightly different in their organization. And that was, again, the result of digitizing first and then processing. This collection is important for a variety of reasons. First, it covers nearly 100 years of history of the University Hospital, which was the first teaching hospital in the country. Or the oldest in the country, rather, sorry. It adds diversity to UMB's historical collections by capturing women's voices. Our collection is heavily white male dominated in the voice that we've captured. And three, while not doctors themselves, these women do provide a female lens in which to view medical practice. It also provides a lens into the power that these women wielded as fundraisers for the hospital, patient advocates, and doctors' wives. And I know I break a lot of rules with all of the words on this screen, but the importance of this is to showcase a decision that I made when I processed the collection to identify these women, at least the board of presidents or the leaders of this organization, by their first name. In any of the minutes and in any of the histories, they are actually Mrs. Doctor's wife. And I was really bothered by that. And I wanted to give them a piece of their identity back. So when I processed the collection, this list of board presidents is actually in the finding aid. It looks like this, so that people, specifically genealogical researchers or other researchers, could identify these women a little bit more easily. And ultimately, this decision has led to this bigger project that we're presenting on today and this presentation. So I will stop talking really soon. This is my last slide before I hand over to Jordan, but this project is a transcription project at its foundation. It aims to transcribe nearly 100 years of handwritten minutes, which date from 1904 to 1998. And it encompasses 20 volumes. One of those volumes is not handwritten, it's actually typed, so we can easily OCR that, which just means that 5% of the minutes are machine readable and searchable, which to me is a problem. I am a department of one with a moderate backlog of processing, digitization, and other projects. So a transcription project was unfortunately not high on my priority list. And it wasn't something I could really, have the time to do. And yes, I realize there are other software out there that can do the work, but we do not have the money to invest in those. And I also didn't have the time to really invest in a free version to try to figure out how it worked or to even offer a crowdsourcing option. So the one thing that I am very lucky here at the HSHSL is leadership is very supportive of the work that I do. And often I am given the time of people in other departments, including Jordan. And when I'm given that time, I have a list of projects that I present to the individual to kind of choose something that could be of interest to them. And Jordan chose to work on this particular project. She will describe why she was interested in this project particularly, but there was a list that she could choose from. And as part of having this list, I also have a bunch of training documents, including a transcription guide, as well as historical research guide to help Jordan along her path to do the research that she will describe in a minute. So yeah, some of the things that she has used have included things in historical collections, but as well as freely available websites like Find a Grave and our newspaper databases that we have here at UMB. She uses Word to do the transcription, which is what you see on your right, and on the left is the page as it appears in the volume. So now I will hand it over to Jordan, and I will slide back so she can get closer to the microphone.
Bear with us.
Here, you take that chair, I'll take yours.
Hi, everyone. Let me know if there's ever any issues hearing me. But again, I'm Jordan. I'm really excited to talk about this, and I'm very grateful to be able to present this project that has become so near and dear to me. And yeah, like Tara mentioned, when she presented a list of projects to me, there were things like transcribing, scanning documents, working with metadata, stuff like that. I was immediately interested in transcribing. It just seemed the most fun. And then I got the option between the Women's Auxiliary Board or transcribing. It was lecture notes from the 1800s. And I was afraid that the medical jargon would be a little bit too much for me to transcribe. So I also have an interest in women. So this was the most exciting for me. When I first started, I knew the first thing that I had to do was decide where in the minutes I wanted to start. And being the completionist that I am, I knew I wanted to start with the first one that we have, which is from 1909. And you can see that on the left. But also, as you might be able to see, I found the handwriting to be pretty difficult to read. The punctuations were kind of different too, which I was not expecting. And it was just taking me a very, very long time to get through a single page. So I decided to jump to the 1960s just as like a palate cleanser. I was just using it as like a break before going back to the beginning. But I found the 60s to be so much easier to read. They were also utilizing a typewriter at this point, so those were obviously easier to read. And I ended up spending the majority of my time in this project in the 1960s. So here on the top, you can see a screenshot, again, of what it looks like when things are handwritten and how they identified these women. So you can see it says Mrs., husband's name, and then their position and their contributions to the board. And then at the bottom, you can see another screenshot where it says Treasurer Mrs. Scherlis, or it looks like it says Mrs. Scherlis. And I'm going to walk you through what I do to try to find these women. The first thing I do is take it to our collection and see what information I can find that we already have in our collection. We have this huge document called History of the Women's Auxiliary Board, and it was made in 1970, and it was just a collection of kind of a narrative telling of what the board has done so far and listing of the members and stuff like that. So I will Control F and I will just search Scherlis. And you can see here that I found Treasurer Mrs. Leonard Scherlis. So I learned two quick things from just this few second search. I learned that the man's name is Leonard, so that'll make him a little bit easier to find. And then I learned that I'm spelling Scherlis correctly. Sometimes if I can't read it very well, I can test out a few variations of the spelling and narrow it down. Next, I will bring it to the most recent annual benefit document that we have. In this example, it's from 1961, and I will again search for Scherlis. Sometimes I'll find a little bit more information, and in here I did. When I search Scherlis, you can see that there are two Dr. and Mrs. Scherlises. We already know we're looking for Leonard Scherlis, so that's great. But we learned that he is a doctor, which means that he will likely be more easy to find, and in turn means that she will also probably be a little bit easier to find. And then fun fact, This Dr. Sidney Scherlis is Leonard's brother, and the wife, yet to be named, also has a brother named Dr. Sidney. So that was fun. After that, I will then leave our personal collection and I'll take it to ProQuest News and Newspapers database, and I will search Dr. Leonard Scherlis. Again, the doctors tend to be easier to find, so in this example, it's very easy to know who I'm looking for. I'm obviously not looking for a retired fish merchant. I'm looking for Dr. Leonard Scherlis. And when you click into this and it's his obituary, you can see it reads, survivors include his wife of 54 years, a former president of the auxiliary for what is now the University of Maryland Medical Center. A lot of times this is where I will find the wife's name. Usually it'll say survivors include his wife, name, and then continue. For some reason, though, she's not listed here. But I did learn two quick things. I learned if you look back up to where it says Dr. Leonard Scherlis, 84, early proponent of CPR, if you look under that, you can see that this was dated January 2006. So now we know his exact year of death, and that will be very useful information later on. And then I also learned that they were married for 54 years. So likely Dr. Leonard Scherlis only had one wife. A lot of times if the doctor divorced and remarried, it can be difficult to narrow down or figure out which woman it is that I'm looking for. But this likely will not be an issue here. No, his name is Leonard and his last name is Scherlis, and we know his exact year of death. So that really helps with the narrowing it down. A lot of times if I don't have any special information like that or exact year of death, especially if they have like a really common name, I will put the cemetery location as Maryland to try to. So I put in all of his information and then I hit search, and here is the man himself, Dr. Leonard Scherlis, and in his bio it reads husband of Barbara K. Scherlis, maiden name Knafel. So now we found her, we found the woman, and we can use her name and start to search her and start to attribute her contributions and her successes to her name and not just Dr. Leonard Scherlis. So when we search her, we find the woman herself. In both of these photos, she's the woman on the far right. And again, everything she does, her contributions to women's history, her contributions to medical history can be attributed to her name and not Dr. Leonard Scherlis all the time. So who is Barbara Knafel Scherlis? So I know that she was born on July 15th, 1925, and I have reason to believe that she might still be alive today, making her 99 years old. The last record I found of her being alive was from 2022 when her brother, Dr. Sidney Knafel, it was his obituary, and she was listed as a survivor. So I know that she was alive in 2022. And then I've also found records of her donating annually to Martha's Vineyard Hospital and Martha's Vineyard Museum. And I believe the latest one I found was 2021. So 2022 is the last known time of her being alive. I did find, it was from January 11th of this year. And it was like an invoice, and it read a credit line. It was an art piece, credit line purchased in honor of Barbara K. Scherlis. So I'm not sure if maybe she passed at the end of 2023 or at the very beginning of this year. I have not been able to find any death information on her. I can't find any grave site information. I can't find an obituary. I can't find anything about her death. So I'm not sure if she's alive today or not, but she very well might be. We know that she was an artist who had an interest in oil painting, and she was also an art collector. It seems like a little bit after 2006, when her husband died, she moved to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, and I believe she is from Massachusetts. She graduated from the all-women's college, Mount Holyoke College, in 1946 with a Bachelor of Arts. I did find something saying that she had her bachelor's degree in zoology, but I wasn't really able to confirm that, so I'm not sure, but we know it was a Bachelor of Arts. And then she also earned her Master's of Liberal Arts from Johns Hopkins University in 1967, which was about the time that I've been working on these transcriptions. So it's interesting to have that context of what was going on in her life or about to be going on in her life as I'm writing and reading about her. I also wanted to talk about how the privilege that Mrs. Barbara Scherlis probably has that makes her searchable and makes it so that I can find her. She is a white woman. She likely came from an educated family. She herself is educated. It seems like she comes from a decent amount of wealth, and we know that she probably has a good amount of money. She's donating annually. She was a doctor's wife. And these things make her easier to search and make her easier to find. There are some women who will go on nameless because of lack of these privileges. And there was one woman that I really wanted to do this case study on, but I couldn't find any information about her. Her name is Mrs. Theobald. She was a part of the board. I can't find her husband's name, which makes me think that he was not a doctor. And I do know that her and her husband were photographers. They had an interest in photography. And they went around Maryland and they took a bunch of photos and they made a collection book of their photos. And they called it Little Known Areas of Maryland. And I believe they went around the state presenting this book. And members of the board had written about how much they loved this book and how inspiring it was. And it just made them like fall in love with the land of Maryland. And I thought that was really cool. And I wanted to do this case study on her, but I could not find her. And I believe it's partially because she was not a doctor's wife. So I just wanted to acknowledge why someone like Barbara Knafel Scherlis is findable. So getting to know these women. Through this project, I have developed a bit of an emotional attachment to these women. I feel a responsibility to get their stories told, to learn their stories, and again, to make them accessible, to make their stories searchable, and to make this a part of today's research. And then through this like little window into their lives, I get to really see a little bit of like who they were and who they are. I know who runs the gift shop. I know who did and did not have salaries. I know how much those salaries were. None of them were making a lot, by the way. But I did know how much those salaries were. When you read between the lines a little bit, you can see like who had tension between who did not like who did people love. I also know who's in charge, who is never in charge. You see the power change over the years. And again, I have just formed this emotional attachment to this project and to these women. So who is Mrs. Doctor's wife? Last fall, 2023, Tara and I watched a National Library Medicine's history talk by Kelly O'Donnell, and she presented on women's auxiliary boards. And through that presentation, which will be linked at the end, by the way, I got to learn a lot about what it meant to be a doctor's wife. And I learned about how much of a status symbol it was and how a lot of girls and women sought out this status. They sought out to be a doctor's wife. They wanted the status and all of the things that come with being a doctor's wife. So that was really interesting. You learn a lot about how these women were raised with doctor's wife skills in mind. Like a lot of them grew up learning how to fundraise and how to run a charity event and how to host, a dinner, a luncheon, all that kind of stuff. These women were raised with that in mind so that they could go out and seek being doctor's wives. How did the hospital benefit from this? Obviously, they got a lot of free and cheap labor from these women. The women did a lot for the hospital, and so much of it, almost entirely all of it, was for free. And again, what was not free was very cheap. But the women ran the volunteers. They completely staffed the gift shop. The gift shop was run by volunteers. They were not paid. And they did a lot of fundraising events. They did charities. They did fashion shows and talent shows and all these kinds of benefits. In the top left photo, you can see two women from the board handing over a check for $35,000. And then in the top middle photo, you can see the same two women donating an audiometer and a respirator on behalf of the board. And then I also read a story about how the board had completely funded a cancer wing being built and added to the hospital. And they wrote about how they wanted the cancer wing to be full of windows so that the cancer patients could get the healing properties from the sun. And again, fully funded by this board, by these women who are not getting paid for this. So the hospital surely benefited. And then over this time, and especially from Kelly O'Donnell's talk, I started to question the potential ethics of this project. Were we forcing a modern day 2024 lens on these women? Again, when they sought out these identities, this is what they wanted. Am I romanticizing what I think they might have wanted if they were here today? Am I forcing something on them that was not them? So we questioned if we should let them remain as Mrs. Doctor's wife. And the answer we came to is that no, we're not doing anything unethical here. We're not taking away what the text says. It still remains as what it says. It still says Mrs. Doctor's wife. We're just simply adding information next to it. And again, beyond these women's individual identities and what they may have wanted individually, this is so much bigger than one person. This is, again, women's contributions to medicine and to women's history. And as it stands right now, it's not as searchable as it can be. And we don't know how many, but we do know that people are researching women's auxiliary boards. This is a huge part of medical history. And as it stands right now, it is not as searchable as it could be. And something Tara told me very early on in this project is that we always want to give the researcher as much information as possible. And by renaming them, simply, we are giving them as much information as we possibly can.
All right, so bear with us a little bit. This is more of a conversation. And I just want to acknowledge, like, I am very lucky in that I get help from other people in the library. Let me know if you can't hear me again. But Jordan is helping me as one staff member part-time. There are 18 more volumes that need to be transcribed, and she hasn't completed this first volume yet. This has been happening for a year. And this is not me throwing shame at Jordan. She would not present with me if I was throwing any kind of shade at her at all. This is just the acknowledgement that this transcription work takes time. It is not easy. You can go over the same word 20 times and not figure out what it is. I also don't have the time to do it myself, and I don't always have the time to check in with her to see where she is in the process and help her answer her questions. So we've started to question the sustainability of this project and whether or not we should continue it. Jordan is part of another department. Her time is ebbing and flowing. This is very much a project that she's loving to do, but again, what is the likelihood of us actually completing this in a period of time that it still is valuable? We don't really have an answer to that yet. Part of this presentation today is us trying to process it and figure out what is the value. But we really enjoy it, and we think that there is there's value and worth to doing it, and trying to figure out the best course of action, which may be bringing in crowdsourcing, opening it up to the public to do some transcription work, or perhaps again investing in software, investing in free or pay software to help us do the transcription so that we can then go back and add the women's information to it. But we don't have the answer yet to what this sustainability looks like.
And I just wanted to point out a little bit of these photos. So the top left one, that is the entire Women's Auxiliary Board collection. So there's 9 boxes, and you can kind of see how big they are to try to give you a little bit of an idea of how much work this could be. The photo under that, I just opened a random box, and you can see some of the minute books and see how thick they are, and also the pen bleeding through, so that's interesting. The photo on the bottom right, that's the journal that I have been working on this whole time. And I tried to capture to give an idea of how thick that journal is. It's the thickest one that I've seen so far. It is taking a long time, and again, as my job changes a little bit, and as I take on different things within my own actual department, my ability to work in this one goes down a little bit. And in the middle photo, I just opened to a random page of that journal so you can see what it looks like physically. And then bringing it up again, I just want to talk about the emotional connection that I have to this project, and how, bottom line, we want to make this successful, and that is the entire point. It is hard for me to want to give up control for crowdsourcing or AI, but I also recognize that my emotional connection to this project has been sealed. And even if other people or non-people are working on it, that's not going to go away. I already have this connection, and I already feel that responsibility to have these women known. But it does make me question, in general, outside of the Women's Auxiliary Board, just the benefits of doing transcriptions by hand, at least to start. That would be a fun conversation aside from this topic.
I have pointed out to Jordan that as an archivist, we are constantly giving up projects that we love to do because we don't have the time to do it, and especially as a solo archivist. So it's a hard lesson to learn.
So we've also, again, talked about like what the future of this project looks like what is next. Do we try to reach out to Mrs. Barbara Scherlis? We know that she has three sons. I think I have a good idea of who and where they are. Would we reach out to them? Do we look for other women? Do we reach out to them? Do we make oral histories? Do we ask them questions? What is and what could be the point and potential of reaching out to these women? And right now, that's my concern with the future of it. Tara, what's your concern with the future of it?
Yeah, I think a concern that I have, if we would reach out and, have a conversation with Mrs. Scherlis, would she be upset? Again, that question earlier of would she be upset that we've found her maiden name and uncovered a piece of her identity that maybe she didn't want people to know about? I don't know. So that is the ethical question is very much on my mind. And especially as if we continue to do this and we continue to find other women, that is a question I have. And I certainly would not want to upset her or like bring any kind of angst to that. But I would really like her to know that her work is still here. It's still alive. We're still promoting it and allowing people to use it. And we're presenting it in a way so people can understand that it is a diverse piece. The future projects, marketing and outreach. I haven't done a lot of marketing and outreach with this particular collection. I would like to tell some more of these women's stories, or at least tell the story of what this organization did, because it was so integral into the history of the hospital. The hospital gained so much from the work of these women. And again, the hospital celebrated its 200th anniversary last year, which is a huge accomplishment here at UMB. Other projects that are occurring, not necessarily because of this collection, but because other work occurs. The Digital Archives team is currently working on a project to clean up our metadata with particular attention to harmful language. So metadata remediation and making sure that our descriptions, our subject headings aren't harmful or wrong, incorrect terms that people would not be using. So that's a project that's happening, and this collection will be part of it. The prayer for hospital auxiliaries that you're seeing on your screen actually brought up a whole other problem within our digital archive, and that is one of license. So again, 2018, I started this collection, had already been digitized, and some of the licenses that were attached to it include, I'm going to look it up because I want to get it right, the Creative Commons non-commercial, no derivatives license. That was attached to this prayer that you're seeing here. When I had a question about somebody wanting to take this prayer and make it more current, better language that we would use today, I could not grant that. So I uncovered that we probably applied incorrect licensing to some of these materials, because this particular prayer has been used by auxiliaries across the country, across the world, actually. So that's another thing that we need to now do, is kind of look at our license and what we've been assigning and like rethink that. But right now, our digital archive is actually being migrated to a completely different, it's not a different platform, but it's being upgraded, and we can't do anything with the collection until the end of December. So everything's a little bit on pause. The better use statistics kind of goes hand in hand with that upgrade. We used to use Google Analytics to keep track of how our digital collections were being used. And for whatever reason, it stopped working the last couple of years. And so we don't have any kind of use statistics on our digital collections. So I don't have any idea or any concept of how much this particular collection gets used. I've had 2 reference questions in the 7 years I've been here about this particular collection. So that also is helping me answer that sustainability question. If this isn't a collection that's highly used, is it because it hasn't been marketed well? Or is it because it's just not in demand? So that's the other piece of this. I really do want to reiterate that I want to move forward with this project. I want to continue it. Jordan does too. We're both really excited about it. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on these presentations that we give about it. But we also have to make sure that the work we're doing is valuable and useful and more than just a pet project.
This is Kelly O'Donnell's fall 2023 talk with the National Library of Medicine. Highly recommend that you check it out. It's called Mrs. Medicine, Doctors' Wives, and the Making of Modern American Healthcare, which inspired the title of this project, and I just highly recommend that you check it out if you're interested.
And last but certainly not least,
Our names.
please feel free to ask us any questions. We have about 28 minutes left, and our contact information is here. If you don't get a chance to ask a question right now, feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to talk more. I mean, as you can see, we're really passionate about this project.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm just so grateful and excited to be able to
Oh my gosh,
show this to people.
we're up to 111.
Yay! I think I saw 112 at one point.
So thank you all for hanging around with us. The link, thank you, Amanda. The link is for Kelly O'Donnell's talk is there. Other links were shared earlier. I'm happy to reshare them. But Amanda, do we have any questions?
We have one so far. So if anyone else has questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A and I'll share them out. So the first is from Harrison Wick from IUP. Harrison says, I think it would be a good idea to share this project with the family of Mrs. Barbara Scherlis. You might have the opportunity to talk with her about it and the goal of the project. And like you said, it could also lead to more information about her views, the views of other women in these collections, and it might also lead to oral history interviews and donations of new archival materials.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because again, this is so ongoing. It was just this week that I found who I believe are her three sons, or I have found two of them, I think. So yeah, thank you for that encouragement.
Hi, Harrison. We work together in another life.
Oh, fun.
Anyway, yeah, I think we really want to. It's just a matter of finding how to do that. And we also, I think we failed to mention this in an earlier slide, but Jordan, I shouldn't say we, Jordan has done a lot of work to try to identify those later women who actually ended up closing the organization. And a lot of them have passed. So like 1999 doesn't seem like that long ago, but the women were, they're no longer, some of them are no longer with us. We haven't looked into the entire realm of possibilities for who might still be around and able to help.
Yeah, and I'm sure I have to believe that, it was the late 90s. I'm sure some of them are still alive. But they're also not on Instagram and updating their daily life. So I'm still learning how to find them today. So, but I have hope. I believe that I'll find some of them.
Great, thank you. I'm going to reshare those collection links because we had a question come in about that. Someone is also asking, curious to know what system you are using and which system you are moving to.
So we use DSpace, which is a very old digital repository type software. We're not hosting it on site. We actually use Appmeyer, which is a DSpace company. So we're sticking with Appmeyer, but they're moving from version 5 to version 7 is what we're moving to. It's not ideal, and I think one of the other things that I haven't talked about is we're looking at other ways to do better exhibits that are digital exhibits instead of continuing to use like what we have, which is more of an institutional repository software for our digital collection. So that's also happening. And maybe someday there will be a Merac presentation on that, but right now that is very much in its infancy.
We look forward to it. So the next question is, can you share any other resources you use in finding these women's names? We've had some luck in looking at correspondence associated with the husband, and I'm curious where others are looking.
A lot of Google. As I mentioned, Find a Grave, newspaper databases. One thing I did with Barbara was when I found out that she moved to Martha's Vineyard and to Massachusetts, I was trying to search their newspaper databases. I see comments for estate records. I'm going to make note of that. Really, Google is your best friend. I know you mentioned a family tree website that doesn't seem very intuitive. I haven't figured it out yet, but do you want to talk about that one?
I use Family Search, I want to say. Okay, one of the greatest things that happened out of COVID was the local library that I have a library card for opened up Ancestry. So I could actually use Ancestry at home to do a lot of this digging. COVID happened. It was open during COVID and maybe the year after, but then, you know, they stopped doing that because of licensing. So I understand like that happened, but like that was really helpful at the time. I do actually use a lot of like my library because again, we're a medical institution. We don't have a lot of history databases here. We have some newspaper article databases, but not like the traditional history ones that you might find in like a liberal arts or a undergraduate heavy institution. So that is one thing that we're facing. But yeah, I think it's Family Search is the one that I've really used and utilized a lot when I'm doing finding aid research or exhibit research on people.
Great, thank you. And another question about if there's any possibility of gaining student employees to work on transcription. It can be difficult and time consuming to train the right students, but the UD University Archives achieved transcription of our 3 handwritten earliest BOT minutes books entirely with student labor.
Yes. I have actually, before Jordan, worked with interns from a variety of different library programs. I actually work with the University of Kentucky's iSchool every March. They do an alternative spring break. So I've had some transcription work done by those students, but it's a week-long program. So you get a week of the student's time, and that's really helpful. Here at UMB, we don't have student workers, at least not in the library. I don't think we have the funding to do it. Like, I don't really think that we can afford to do that, which is kind of crazy when you think about. We are reinvigorating and reinvesting in our internship program to hopefully be able to hire more interns and to pay them. But then again, that's another thing that's happening on top of everything else. Again, like at my last place of employment, I did use student workers. I love working with students and I really miss that part of it. It hasn't been possible here because our student body is medical, social work, dental. They're just not able or interested in history as much. So I utilize other staff, interns when I get the chance, but you all know how much time and effort it takes to supervise an intern, and I do want to make sure that I'm giving them the right attention to.
Good considerations. One more comment just came in, just thinking about the vendor from the page was very interesting and might benefit you with going through translation faster.
I would love to use that. We have to find, maybe if we track down Mrs. Scherlis's sons, they'll donate money.
Yeah, I was gonna say someone could donate, yeah.
If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A here and I will share them out. I'm just seeing some comments come in for some really, thank you for a great presentation so far.
Thank you. I'm trying to type in the chat, but I can't type and talk at the same time.
You got this one. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you all for hanging around for the last session. I had no belief that we'd have this many people, so it's just thrilling.
All right, I'm seeing a bunch more thank yous. So assuming there are no other questions, we can hang on for just a minute if anybody has any, but I do need to say thank you to Power Library for sponsoring this session. Thank you so much to Tara and Jordan for a wonderful presentation, and thank you to everyone else for participating in this session and the conference at large. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.